being a showrunner for this show differed from maybe your past experiences because it's partnered with Netflix and ingratiated in new media?
Well, I mean, I consider myself extremely fortunate to have this be sort of a third act of my career in a way, because starting out in the 3 network broadcast universe, which had a different set of storytelling constraints, different storytelling needs because it was ad supported, but along with it constraints, specifically the FCC. And then moving, into basic cable, because I really sort of got in on the ground floor of basic cable with the Shield. And so I'm really excited to see how storytelling changes and evolves, and with new media, because I think it does. I think Marshall McLuhan was really right, and the idea that the medium shapes the message, the medium of new media. I can't wait to see what it's doing. I mean, I'm aware of some little minor trends and stuff, but the way people consume TV, consume content is different than it was. And I think it's exciting. First of all, you have a much more diligent, devoted, literate audience. It's, you're not making television as architecture. It's not just something that's on in the background while you're, giving yourself a manicure or something like that. People that are sitting watching Hemlock Grove are showing up because they're really focused on it and they really care, and they care about these characters and they're invested in them. And that's exciting for a writer, for sure.
How'd you go about adapting your writing style to this new format?
I don't know that it's really changed our writing style so much. I think it does give us certain freedoms. I mean, we don't need to worry about recapitulating plot lines and story to get people up to speed in case they missed last week's episode. I mean, people are watching these shows in big bites, so you can assume that people are pretty much up to speed. So we're not worrying about having to, remind everybody where we are in time and space, and I think that frees out some storytelling real estate to tell more story, and it's very freeing. And again, just knowing that we're dealing with a very devoted audience and they stop the film and they rewind and they look at what did I miss? What did I see? I mean, it's a real close reading of a television show. Have you guys seen the show?
Yeah.
So you're aware of the dream sequences that are starting to emerge. In that sense, I asked Peter Blake, put one producer writer in charge of the dreams. He was the dream wrangler for this season, and I asked him to think about the dreams as a whole, as a continuum, as a story with a beginning, middle, and end, so that the iconography in the dreams was consistent and built on itself, that we were creating a separate dream mythology that when looked at in toto would make sense. Because I know that our very diligent, nearly fanatical audience is going to stop and they're going to want to understand every little thing. I've showed it to just a couple of people already, and it's like they're seeing stuff in there that it was like I had never even intended. I mean, it's a little bit like somebody finding something in a poem that the poet never intended. So I think it's made us really focused and granular in our approach to detail.
So how much free reign do you have, since season 1 was all based on the book and now there's no book? So how do you come up with the story ideas? It sounded like when we were talking with Eli, it just comes up with moments and then revolve the story around it. Is that how it's done?
Well, no. I mean, I think we would really. I would describe it. I describe the same phenomenon probably in different terms because we all bring different process and different vocabularies to the same thing. Mm-hmm. I wasn't concerned about being off book because frankly I had not read the book intentionally. I look forward to reading it after the show's done. I just wanted to be And it's something I did. I never read the Dexter books, and when I was working on The Shield, I never watched The Wire. I just I want to keep a pure, reaction to the material, and the idea of really taking our cues from where we found these characters when we saw them last. Olivia being zipped into a body bag, for example, left for dead. But we obviously know Star Fonka's character is not going to be coming back. So where do you start with that character after not only the physical trauma that she sustained, but the psychological trauma, the emotional trauma of having been just so viciously, horribly assaulted by your son, by your child. So storytelling kind of flows out of, past his prologue, out of the situations we're finding our characters in. You've got Norman, who has been with this woman for 20 years and doesn't understand her true nature. We saw an opportunity. Here's the one character who's excluded from the mythology of the show, which actually, other than Dark Angel, people that aren't in on the mythology, it's actually very hard to write those characters because it's hard to pull them into the narrative. So we made a virtue of that, gosh, well, what happens as he begins to realize, as he begins to pick up on these cues that maybe he's been ignoring or whatever about who and what Olivia is. It seemed that we could generate a good deal of story out of that. This season was about the boys kind of matriculating into adulthood, a boys to men story, if you will, and separating each from their mothers. Well, what does that look like in story terms? Roman becoming, the young scion, sort of motivated by his father's example to take over, put his boyish youth behind in that sort of Prince Hal way, and becoming king, becoming the master of his domain. So we took our cues for storytelling really out of character and where they were in their lives.
I wanted to revisit the dream mythology you were talking
Sure.
about. Is there maybe a way for you guys to expand in different worlds utilizing this dream mythology by incorporating more into dream sequences? Or do you guys have plans for that?
Well, you got to be careful with dream sequences. I find you don't want it to become a crutch to the storytelling. It's great if it's a way to sort of dramatize, to show sort of an internal monologue. But if it just becomes too devicey and if it becomes an easy button, then I think it erodes the audience's investment in the storytelling. I think it's for example, Dexter's voice, in that show, if you know it at all. We were really, really careful about how and when to use that, when to use this interior monologue. We never used it to shore up the narrative. We never used it to advance story, because that was a cheat. Using that as a writer's cheat to basically account for something in exposition or whatever by throwing it into Dexter's dream. That the self-imposed discipline of limiting it to exfoliating his inner psychological landscape, emotional landscape, is really what that was there for. And I would take the same caution with dream sequences. I mean, it's great if it's showing us something. We do it a little more narratively than in Dexter, because people are seeing things as you get deeper into the show. People are seeing things that don't make sense to them. It doesn't really advance the story. It doesn't make sense what they're seeing. But when they find themselves in this situation, they realize that their dream had been a foretelling of that. So the reality becomes a payoff to the dream rather than the dream leading them to something. And it's I'm sorry, that answer's a little technical, but we just don't want to lean on it as a story crutch.
Right.
As you're developing the story, I understand that you pay scrupulous detail to character and the story, but How is it factoring in for you in this particular show, because it is very special effects heavy and there is this whole supernatural element?
Two parts of that question. Supernatural, I mean, I dispute the term really. Let me define it. Supernatural is a sort of a stand-in word. It's a way of describing something that we don't have words for. I really eschew the idea that there's anything magical happening in our world. Because if things can happen magically and somebody waves a wand and something happens, essentially you're telling the audience, if there's a mystical easy button in your storytelling, you're telling the audience that they don't have to believe in the stakes that you're lining up. I mean, you'll notice this here. The roofie thing disappeared because that became too much of in our opinion, an easy button for Roman. Well, if he has that ability, why is he not invoking it, when he needs to? So what we've done is to put, whether we tell the audience this at some point or not, I don't know, but for our own benefit, we've kind of devised a scientific, albeit pseudoscientific, unified field underneath all the mythology in the show that gives an explanation to us why things are happening, how things are happening, so that it isn't just a hodgepodge of disconnected events, because wouldn't it be cool if, my question always is, well, why and how? And why is this happening? And how, whisper to me the logic of how it can happen. Not just because we want to see it and it's cool, but how is it happening according to the rules of our universe? So that addresses the supernatural part of it, I think. I'm sorry, what was the other?
How is it when you're going through the creative process of also factoring into the story that you need to have all of these special effects?
Oh, special effects, yeah.
Gory aspects.
Yeah, special effects, right. Special effects to me are, again, I mean, I'm very new to them. This was really, on Dark Angel we had just a little bit of special effects, and also special effects in television was very much in its infancy. I mean, it was kind of limited to green screen. So I come out of mostly social realist storytelling, so I don't have a huge background in this. And this year was, a graduate course in getting up to speed on where effects are and what the state of the art is, and learning about them, and even developing a vocabulary just to be able to communicate with the effects producers and stuff. But number one, we've got to be able to do effects really, really well, because on a service like Netflix, our show is competing against the Jim Cameron movie in terms of effects, so the quality of them. We're also dealing with an incredibly attuned, super literate effects audience, so we've got to do them really well and sweat every little tiny detail of it, because we're dealing with an audience that will just bust you stone cold if you fuck something up and they go, yeah, that's whack, I've seen that before, they did that here, or whatever, So I had to learn about that, unfortunately, and be guided by the really brilliant effects people we dealt with, Zoic and Stargate and Atmosphere, those guys. But again, those effects and the gore are, weren't designed to be sort of stunts, to sort of show off, to be exploited in any way. Oh, look at us, we can do this. All of it needs to come out of, kind of erupt from a dramatic fabric, a fabric of character, so that when looked in context, it makes perfect sense, rather than just be something we're sort of glomming on because we can. I wanted to make sure that effects were truly organic to the story we were telling. And again, the story flowing out of character primarily.
Earlier today, Eli said that one of the great assets that you brought to the show was being a fan and bringing a fresh pair of eyes to the whole project. What attracted you as a fan?
Well, as a viewer, the show last season was beautifully produced, really rendered so beautifully. The production design was extraordinary. Drew Boughton is, just amazing, creating this luscious world, a rich, elegant world, but just slightly out of time and space. So it was very inviting visually. And then Fernando Arguelles, just shot such a beautiful show. The quality of light, the way there was a sort of a hauntedness even in broad daylight that just really got under your skin. So visually it was an extremely appealing show. And then, just looking at this cast, wonderful actors, and the opportunity to work with somebody as talented. I've been a huge fan of Famke for a long time, and Dougray and Bill and Landon were new to me, and I just thought that their instruments were so precise, and they really understood their characters so well. And it's just been, I found myself wandering around in an extremely Tony neighborhood of thespians on this show, and I, really wanted to work with them and write for them. And then it's been that wonderful alchemy of making television takes over, where you're working with wonderful actors that are showing you things about characters that you then write to, and it becomes, like an improvisational jazz quartet or something.
Thanks. And did you make any discoveries while working with the cast for ideas for the next season, possibly? If you guys choose to go.
Oh boy, next season. I haven't really thought about next season. We were really just thinking in very holistic terms about this season, really just wanting to get underneath, understand where all these characters are, and being really thorough and complete in that. What I found out is all these wonderful actors are, just spectacularly wonderful. Famke, for example, it's, she can just do anything. She is, her sense of humor, her wryness, her vulnerability, her sarcasm, her wickedness, all of it can coexist in just these little flashes of character. It's great. So you just want to write to that. The same with the boys. The steeliness that Bill Skarsgård brings to that role, that's covering up a great big wound there. It's just, he gets all of that in his performance. It's terrific. And Landon, talking to him about him actually being, what I learned from him was how at ease he is with his lycanthropy. Just personally, he was saying, no, I know what I am. I know what I am, and I like being what I am. And that was a real cool thing to hear the actor tell you that, because it told me something about Peter. So yeah, it's, again, I refer back to the alchemy, that sort of call and response that goes on between a writer and an actor.
What can we expect as far as family dynamics in future episodes or future seasons?
Yeah, well, in many respects, people ask me, well, what's Hemlock Grove about? I certainly don't want to say that, it's a vampire show and there's a werewolf and a mad scientist and it's Frankenstein. So, that just doesn't even begin to do justice. I think really what the show is, at the end of the day, is I think it's a family show. And it's a show about family dynamics. It's these individual families, Peter and his family, and Roman and his family, and then the larger family of the village of Hemlock Grove. So it's a show really about family dynamics and the ebb and flow of that. And anybody who's been to a particularly traumatic Thanksgiving dinner knows, how fucked up families are and how unpredictable they are, and I think as we learn more about these characters, we learn more about how unpredictable that family is.
Can we expect new family members to pop up future episodes?
I'd like to meet the extended family of. Speaking for myself, by the way, one of the reasons I moved to California was to get away from the family. Just be out here and be completely independent of family constraints. I wouldn't say that I feel that way about Roman and Peter. I want to know more about their families, where they come from, who their antecedents are, and who their royal papas are. I mean, I think it would be cool to get into that. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if we start digging around in that neck of the woods next season.
Last question.
Whose voice do you enjoy writing in the most? Is there one character that speaks to you?
Wow.
I'm pulling for Olivia.
Yeah, well, I think all of us, the thing about writers' rooms is good writers' rooms, everybody does different things. And I know Evan Dunsky he just writes Dr. Price like nobody's business. I just love watching Joel and Evan do their thing and their characters. I really enjoy Olivia's voice, especially this season. I've had a lot of fun doing that because it's so variegated and she's so amazing. The thing about, what's the tricky thing about writing both for Roman and Peter is they're characters that are very guarded. They're not easy nuts to crack. And so there's an awful lot there. It's all underneath the surface, but they say much less than they feel. So just in terms of sheer athleticism of wordsmithery, I have a lot of fun writing Olivia because Peter doesn't say much about what's on his mind, and neither does Roman.